My wife got G at her bachelorette party thought I'd never find out. Until I quietly vanished before the wedding, and what happened next left everyone speechless. My name is Marcus Hale, and let me tell you something about the American dream. It's a real son of a bitch when it decides to sucker punch you in the gut. 2 years ago, I was living what every basic dude with a business degree thinks is the perfect life. Hell, I was practically the poster child for having your shit together in your late 20s. I had a software company that was actually making money, not just burning through venture capital like most startups run by guys who think wearing hoodies to board meetings makes them Steve Jobs. No, my company was genuinely thriving, pulling in 7 figures annually, and I wasn't even 30 yet. My parents, God bless their suburban hearts, couldn't shut up about their successful son at every neighborhood barbecue and Christmas party. You know how it goes. Your mom corners some poor soul at the grocery store and launches into this unsolicited biography about how little Marcus built his own company from scratch. Dad would practically burst with pride whenever someone asked what I did for a living. Software solutions, he'd say with this smug grin, like he had any clue what that actually meant beyond computers make money somehow. Then there was my brother Daniel, my supposed ride or die, the guy who knew all my secrets and had my back through every stupid decision I'd made since we were kids stealing Dad's beer from the garage fridge. We had that bond, you know? The kind where you can call at 3 in the morning and they'll show up with pizza and terrible advice, no questions asked. At least, that's what I thought we had. But the real crown jewel of my supposedly perfect existence was Christina Ward. Jesus Christ, where do I even start with Christina? This woman wasn't just beautiful. Though let's be real, she was a certified knockout with those green eyes and this smile that could probably end wars if deployed strategically. She was the whole package. Smart enough to hold her own in any conversation, ambitious enough to have her own career goals, and funny in that dry, sarcastic way that made me think we were perfectly matched intellectually. For 3 years, we built what I genuinely believed was a real partnership. Not one of those shallow relationships where you're just splitting rent and pretending to like each other's friends. No, this felt like the real deal. We bought a condo together, a nice place with granite countertops and one of those kitchen islands that makes you feel like you're living in a home improvement commercial. We adopted this golden retriever named Charlie who was basically our practice kid, complete with his own Instagram account, because that's apparently what responsible pet parents do now. Christina and I would spend hours planning our future like we were mapping out a business strategy. Dream vacations to places like Japan and Iceland, conversations about what we'd name our kids, debates about whether we wanted to live in the suburbs or stay urban. She had this way of making even the mundane stuff feel significant. Grocery shopping became this thing where we'd argue about organic versus conventional produce, and somehow she made me care about thread count when we bought sheets. What really got me was how seamlessly she fit into my world and how naturally I slipped into hers. Her parents treated me like I was already family. Her dad would corner me during dinner parties to talk business, and her mom would text me directly about family events. Meanwhile, my own mother had basically adopted Christina as the daughter she never had. They'd go shopping together, share recipes, and have these long phone conversations about God knows what. It was like we'd created this perfect little ecosystem where everyone loved everyone, and the future was just this bright, shiny thing waiting for us to claim it. I thought I was the luckiest bastard alive. Here I was with a successful business, a woman who challenged me intellectually and supported me emotionally, and a family situation that didn't involve therapy or restraining orders. I mean, what more could a guy ask for? We had our shit figured out while most of our friends were still trying to decide if they wanted to be adults or keep pretending that 30 was the new 20. So naturally, when I finally worked up the courage to propose, I went all out. Not because I felt pressured or because it was time, but because I genuinely couldn't imagine my life without this woman in it. I planned this elaborate sunrise hike to her favorite spot in the mountains, complete with a photographer hidden in the bushes like some kind of romantic paparazzi. I had the ring custom designed, spent weeks agonizing over every detail because I wanted it to be perfect for her. When I got down on one knee that morning, with the sun painting the sky all these ridiculous shades of pink and orange, I was absolutely certain we were solid. Rock solid. The kind of solid that survives job losses and family drama and all the other garbage life throws at you. She said yes. obviously, and cried those happy tears that make you feel like you're in a movie. We called our parents right there on the mountain, and everyone was thrilled and started making plans and talking about venues. I thought I'd won the lottery, the relationship lottery that most people spend their entire lives trying to hit. I had found my person, the one who made all the cheesy romantic comedy bullshit actually make sense. The one who made me want to be better without making me feel like I wasn't good enough as I was. The one who laughed at my terrible jokes and called me out on my worst habits and somehow made even mundane Tuesday nights feel like something worth celebrating. But here's the thing about life. It's got this absolutely twisted sense of humor and perfect timing when it comes to destroying everything you think you understand about yourself and the people you love. Just when you're feeling most confident, most secure, most certain that you've got it all figured out, life decides to test exactly how unbreakable your unbreakable really is. And trust me, what I thought was unbreakable turned out to be made of something a lot more fragile than I ever imagined. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At that moment, on that mountain, with that ring on her finger and those tears in her eyes, I genuinely believed we had beaten the odds. I thought we were different, special, destined for one of those love stories that makes other people believe in forever. Turns out I was right about one thing. We definitely were going to be a story people would remember, just not the kind I had in mind. So let me paint you a picture of how quickly your entire world can go from Pinterest perfect to Jerry Springer nightmare, courtesy of one Becca Lewis. Christina's maid of honor and apparently the devil's own event coordinator. If you've ever wondered what pure evil looks like wrapped in a size 2 dress with a sociology degree, let me introduce you to this absolute gem of a human being. Becca had been Christina's best friend since college. One of those ride-or-die friendships that I always respected, even though something about Becca made my skin crawl. She was the kind of person who always had to one-up everyone's stories, who posted inspirational quotes on Instagram while talking shit about people behind their backs, and who somehow managed to make every conversation about herself. But Christina loved her, so I played nice and pretended not to notice when Becca would make little passive-aggressive comments about men in general and me specifically. When it came time to plan Christina's bachelorette party, Becca took charge like she was organizing a military operation. And honestly, I was relieved. Planning parties isn't exactly my forte. I'm more of a order pizza and watch Netflix kind of guy when it comes to celebrations. So when Becca announced she was taking the girls to Miami for a long weekend, I thought it sounded perfect. Sun, drinks, dancing, the whole stereotypical bachelorette experience that would give Christina great stories to tell our future kids. The guest list was exactly what you'd expect. Christina's younger sister Olivia, who was still in that phase where she thought being 23 made her wise about the world, plus 10 other friends from college and work, all of them decent people as far as I knew. Sure, a couple of them were still stuck in that post-college party phase where every weekend was an excuse to blackout drink and make questionable decisions, but nothing too crazy. Or so I thought. The first night went exactly as advertised. I got the obligatory group photos via text. You know the ones, where everyone's holding colorful drinks and making those exaggerated, we're having so much fun faces for social media. Christina looked gorgeous, obviously, wearing this little black dress that made me simultaneously proud she was mine and slightly jealous of every guy who got to look at her. They hit up some trendy rooftop bar, took a million selfies, and probably spent more on bottle service than I spend on groceries in a month. Classic Miami bachelorette bullshit, exactly what I expected. But then came night 2, and this is where Becca's true genius for destruction really shined. See, while the first night was all about public consumption, the Instagram stories, the Facebook check-ins, the carefully curated photos designed to make everyone back home jealous, night 2 was supposed to be private. Very private. The kind of private that requires signing NDAs and turning off location services. Becca had arranged for the party to move from the clubs to this rental house in South Beach. Nothing too suspicious about that. Girls' trips often end up in some ridiculous Airbnb where everyone can spread out and continue the party without worrying about hotel noise complaints or judgmental tourists. What she didn't advertise in the group chat was that she'd also arranged for some entertainment. For male dancers, to be exact. But let's call them what they actually were. Male strippers who specialized in private parties for groups of wealthy women looking to live out their 50 Shades fantasies. These weren't your typical Magic Mike wannabes doing cheesy routines at some dive bar. No, these were full-service performers who came with their own music, their own props, and absolutely zero boundaries when it came to audience participation. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. While I was back home, probably watching some mindless action movie and missing Christina like the devoted fiancé I was, she was discovering exactly what kind of woman she became when nobody was watching. Or at least, when she thought nobody was watching. The drinks were flowing, top shelf everything, because Becca never did anything halfway. Someone had brought party favors of the pharmaceutical variety, because apparently mimosas and champagne weren't enough to lower inhibitions for what Becca had planned. And slowly but surely, my sweet, conservative, let's wait until marriage for the really kinky stuff, fiancé started transforming into someone I wouldn't have recognized if I'd been standing right there. The cheering started innocently enough. A little whooping and hollering as the guys did their choreographed routines, the kind of noise you'd expect from any group of drunk women watching attractive men take their clothes off. But as the night progressed and the alcohol kicked in and whatever else they were taking started working its magic, things escalated quickly. What began as innocent fun, the kind of thing that happens at bachelor and bachelorette parties across America every weekend, turned into something that would make a porn director blush. The dancing became touching. The touching became participating. And my precious Christina, the woman who blushed when we talked about trying new positions, became the star of her own private show while her friends cheered her on like she was competing for Olympic gold in infidelity. The worst part? They filmed everything. Every single degrading moment, every cheer, every laugh, every second of my fiancé doing things with strangers that she'd never even suggested we try together. Becca, ever the documentarian, made sure to capture it all from multiple angles. For posterity, she probably told herself. For blackmail material, more likely. But here's the real kicker, it wasn't just Christina. This became a group activity, a sisterhood bonding experience where inhibitions were checked at the door and marriage vows were apparently just suggestions. Olivia, sweet little Olivia who still called me future brother-in-law and asked my advice about boys, turned out to be just as enthusiastic as her older sister. Half the bridesmaids joined in like it was some kind of twisted team-building exercise. And through it all, there was Becca, orchestrating the whole thing like a conductor leading a symphony of betrayal. She was the one encouraging, the one filming, the one making sure everyone got their turn in the spotlight. She turned my fiancé's bachelorette party into something that would have made Hugh Hefner proud. The truly beautiful irony? While they were all getting their kicks in Miami, thinking their secrets were safe in that rented house, technology had other plans. Those videos, those precious memories of their girls' weekend, were automatically backing up to the cloud. Our shared cloud storage account, specifically, the same one we used for wedding planning and vacation photos and all those sweet, innocent moments from our 3 years together. So while Christina was living it up in South Beach, discovering her inner porn star with 4 random dudes and her giggling friends, every single second was being preserved for posterity in high definition, just waiting for me to discover it. And discover it I did. You know that moment in horror movies when the protagonist realizes the monster has been living in their house the whole time? That split second when everything they thought they knew about their safe little world gets turned upside down and they're standing there like an idiot wondering how they missed all the obvious signs? Yeah, well, that was me at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, sitting in my home office in my boxers, staring at my laptop screen like it had just grown fangs and started speaking Latin. Christina had gotten back from Miami 3 days earlier, all sun-kissed and glowing, full of stories about overpriced drinks and how Olivia had gotten so drunk she tried to order room service from a lamp. Cute stories. Innocent stories. The kind of harmless bachelorette party tales that make for good dinner conversation with the in-laws. She'd show me photos on her phone, the usual suspects posing at various Miami hotspots, everyone looking appropriately wild but not too wild, like they were auditioning for a reality show about responsible adult women having clean fun. What she didn't tell me about were the other photos. The ones that were quietly uploading themselves to our shared cloud storage while she regaled me with edited highlights of her weekend. See, here's the thing about modern technology. It's designed to make our lives easier by automatically backing up every precious memory. Family vacations, birthday parties, random Tuesday afternoon selfies, and apparently, your fiancé's weekend-long descent into behavior that would make a porn star proud. I'd been working late, trying to finish up some code for a client presentation, when I decided to grab some photos from our Miami trip last year for a slideshow. Just clicking through our shared albums, looking for that perfect sunset shot, when suddenly I'm staring at a thumbnail that definitely wasn't from our romantic getaway. It was Christina, all right. But this wasn't the Christina who worried about whether her dress was too short for church or who made me turn around when she was getting changed. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe someone else's photos had gotten mixed up with ours through some cloud storage glitch. Technology screws up all the time, right? But then I saw the timestamp. Last weekend, Miami. And then I saw Becca in the background, holding up her phone like she was filming a documentary about the complete destruction of my faith in humanity. I sat there for probably 10 minutes, just staring at that first thumbnail, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. It's funny how your mind tries to protect you from devastating information by simply refusing to accept it. Like, maybe if I just didn't click on that video, it wouldn't be real. Maybe if I pretended I never saw it, I could go back to my nice little fantasy where my fiancée was this sweet, conservative girl who thought missionary position was adventurous. But curiosity and masochism make terrible bedfellows, and eventually I clicked. And then I clicked on another one, and another. Each video was like a fresh punch to the gut, a new revelation about exactly how wrong I'd been about the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. There she was, my sweet Christina, doing things with complete strangers that we'd never even discussed in our most intimate moments together. The worst part wasn't even what she was doing, though trust me, that was pretty fucking devastating. The worst part was how much she was enjoying it. The laughter, the enthusiasm, the complete abandonment of every boundary we'd ever established in our relationship. She wasn't drunk and making a mistake. She wasn't being pressured or coerced. She was having the time of her life, living out some fantasy I apparently never even knew existed. And there were her friends, cheering her on like she was winning Olympic gold in betrayal. Becca, naturally, was the ringleader, encouraging every degrading moment while making sure to capture it all from the best angles. Even sweet little Olivia was there, laughing and participating like this was just another Tuesday night for the Ward family women. I must have watched those videos for 3 hours, my brain cycling through every emotion a human being can experience in rapid succession. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief, rage, disgust, and finally, this weird, cold calculation that I didn't even recognize as coming from me. It was like watching my personality split in real time, the emotional Marcus getting shoved into a closet while this new, analytical version took control. The next few days were absolutely surreal. Christina went about her normal routine like nothing had happened, chatting about wedding details and asking my opinion on centerpieces while I sat there knowing exactly what those perfectly manicured hands had been doing just days before. She'd curl up next to me on the couch to watch TV, and I'd have to fight the urge to ask her if the guys in Miami had been better than me. She'd kiss me good morning, and I'd wonder if she was thinking about kissing them. But here's the thing that surprised me most about myself. I didn't explode. I didn't scream or throw things or demand explanations. Instead, I became this master actor, playing the role of devoted fiancé while my brain worked overtime planning my exit strategy. We went to dinner with her parents, and I smiled and nodded while her mother talked about how excited she was for the wedding. We met with the caterer, and I pretended to care about the difference between salmon and chicken while mentally calculating how much money I was about to lose on deposits. The performance of my life culminated in what should have been a romantic evening at home. We'd ordered Thai food and opened a bottle of wine, sitting at our kitchen island discussing final wedding details like we were planning a military operation instead of what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Christina was animated, excited, talking about how perfect everything was going to be while I sat there thinking about how perfect her performance had been in Miami. That's when I decided to have a little fun with the situation. I raised my wine glass and looked directly into her eyes, those beautiful green eyes that I'd thought held nothing but love and honesty, and proposed a toast. To the truth, I said, watching her face carefully, and how it always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep people try to bury it. She laughed, but it was nervous, uncertain. She clinked her glass against mine and took a sip, but I could see the wheels turning behind those eyes. Something in my tone, maybe, or the way I was looking at her. For just a second, I saw a flicker of fear cross her face, like she was wondering if I might know something I wasn't supposed to know. But then the moment passed, and she was back to chattering about flowers and seating arrangements, and I was back to playing my part. The perfect fiancé, blissfully unaware that his entire life was built on a foundation of lies and shared cloud storage. Little did she know, the truth had already found its way to the surface, and I was about to make sure everyone else could see it too. There's something absolutely liberating about burning your entire life to the ground when you know you're doing it for all the right reasons. Most people spend their whole lives trapped by inertia, staying in shitty situations because change is scary and the unknown feels worse than the familiar misery. But when you've got nothing left to lose because everything you thought you had was just an elaborate lie anyway, well, that's when you discover what real freedom feels like. I woke up that Thursday morning at 5:30 a.m., like I had every day for the past 3 years. Christina was still dead asleep next to me, sprawled across her side of the bed in that oversized NYU t-shirt she'd been wearing since college, her hair fanned out across the pillow like some kind of Renaissance painting. For a split second, looking at her peaceful face in the early morning light, I almost forgot what I knew. Almost let myself slip back into the fantasy that this was still my life, that she was still my person, that we were still building something real together. But then I remembered those videos, and that momentary weakness passed like a bad hangover. I slipped out of bed without making a sound, a skill I'd perfected over 3 years of early morning conference calls with clients on the West Coast, and headed to the shower. As the hot water hit my face, I ran through my mental checklist one more time. Today was the day I became a ghost. I'd spent the last week planning this exit like it was the most important business deal of my life, which in a way, it was. The business deal where I traded my old, pathetic, deceived life for something clean and new. I'd already transferred the important files from my office to a secure server, quietly closed out projects with existing clients, and set up automatic payments for all the bills that would need handling in the coming weeks. I wasn't just disappearing. I was evaporating without leaving a trace of financial chaos behind me. By 6:15, I was dressed and moving through our condo like a man on a mission. I grabbed my go bag from the back of our closet, a simple duffel with enough clothes and essentials to last me a few weeks while I figured out my next move. Everything else, all the accumulated stuff of our shared life, could stay right where it was. I didn't want any of it anymore. Every piece of furniture, every photo, every little decorative item we'd picked out together had been contaminated by the truth of who she really was. Christina never stirred as I wrote out the checks for the wedding vendors. Every single one, paid in full with little notes explaining that the wedding was canceled and they should keep their deposits as compensation for the late notice. The florist, the caterer, the band, the photographer, all of them got their money and their freedom. I wasn't going to let innocent small business owners suffer because my fiancé turned out to be a fraud. The note I left on the kitchen counter was a masterpiece of brevity. The wedding is off. Take care of yourself. 22 words to end a 3-year relationship and a lifetime of shared plans. I probably spent more words ordering coffee at Starbucks, but sometimes the most devastating messages are the shortest ones. No explanation, no accusations, no dramatic flourishes. Just facts, delivered with the emotional warmth of a parking ticket. I locked the door behind me at 7:45 a.m. and dropped my keys in the mailbox. By 8:30, I was at my office, boxing up the last of my personal items while my assistant Rebecca, yes, another Rebecca, because apparently that name was cursed in my life, watched me with growing concern. She kept asking if everything was okay, if there was anything she could do to help, if I was taking a vacation. Sweet kid, probably about Christina's age, still young enough to believe that successful people don't just implode their entire lives on a random Thursday morning. I'm taking an extended break, I told her, which was technically true. An extended break from trusting people, from believing in fairy tale relationships, from being the kind of naive idiot who thinks shared cloud storage is just for vacation photos. Forward any urgent calls to my cell, but otherwise, consider this place closed indefinitely. The moving company arrived at our condo at exactly 10 a.m., just like I'd scheduled. professional, efficient, and completely indifferent to the emotional weight of what they were packing. My clothes, my books, my computer equipment, my coffee maker. Everything that was purely mine got loaded into a truck and hauled away to a storage unit across town. I watched 3 years of domestic bliss get reduced to boxes and labels, and felt absolutely nothing. By noon, I was standing in the Verizon store, canceling my phone service and tossing my iPhone into the trash like it was contaminated with the plague. The teenage employee looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but he processed the cancellation anyway. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, every digital footprint of Marcus Hale, successful entrepreneur and devoted fiancé, got deleted with the same clinical efficiency I used to debug code. The bank was my next stop, where I closed our joint checking account and moved everything into a new account at a different institution. Clean break. No shared financial entanglements. No way for her to track my movements through credit card statements or online banking. I even changed my direct deposit information for the business accounts, routing everything through a completely separate financial ecosystem. Daniel was the only person who got a heads up, and even that was minimal. A single text from a burner phone, wedding's off. Christina knows why. I'm fine. Don't contact me for a while. My brother, bless his heart, immediately started calling the burner number, but I turned the phone off and threw it in a different trash can. Even Daniel, my supposed ally, was going to have to wait for explanations. The hotel I checked into was deliberately generic. One of those extended stay places that cater to business travelers and people in the middle of life transitions. Clean, anonymous, and staffed by people who were paid to mind their own business. I registered under a false name, paid cash for a week, and settled into my temporary exile like a man entering witness protection. Christina would wake up tomorrow morning to discover that her fiancé had vanished into thin air. No note explaining why, no angry confrontation, no chance to offer explanations or apologies or promises to change. Just absence, sudden and complete, like I'd been raptured while she slept. Her phone calls would go straight to a disconnected number. Her texts would disappear into the digital void. Her emails would bounce back like I'd never existed. For the first time in 3 years, Christina Ward would have to face the consequences of her actions without me there to cushion the blow or make excuses for her behavior. And somewhere in that anonymous hotel room, I smiled for the first time in a week. Saturday morning, June 15th. What should have been our wedding day? What should have been the culmination of 3 years of planning? The day Christina walked down the aisle in that ridiculously expensive dress she'd spent months obsessing over. The day I promised to love and cherish her until death do us part. Instead, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, nursing my third espresso and putting the finishing touches on what would become the most visited website in Christina Ward's personal history. You know what's beautiful about being a software developer? You learn to think in systems, in cause and effect, in elegant solutions to complex problems. And Christina's little Miami adventure had presented me with a fascinating problem. How do you ensure that actions have consequences when the person committing those actions thinks they've gotten away with murder? How do you make sure the truth gets the audience it deserves? The answer, as it turns out, is surprisingly simple. You build a website. Not just any website, mind you. This wasn't some amateur-hour revenge blog thrown together in a fit of rage. No, this was a professional-grade digital monument to accountability, designed with the same attention to detail I'd put into million-dollar client projects. Clean layout, optimized for mobile viewing, fast loading times, and search engine optimization that would make a marketing guru weep with envy. The domain name was perfect in its simplicity, ChristinaWardTruth.com. Her full name, right there in the URL, so anyone who Googled her would find exactly what they were looking for. I registered it through a privacy service, paid for 3 years upfront, and set up hosting on a server farm that could handle serious traffic. Because something told me this site was going to be popular. The homepage was a masterpiece of understated design. Just her name at the top in elegant typography, followed by a simple tagline. The truth about a Miami weekend. Below that, a brief explanation of what visitors were about to see, written in the kind of clinical, professional language you'd find in a corporate press release. No emotional outbursts, no angry rants, just facts presented with the cold efficiency of a coroner's report. The following documentation was automatically uploaded to shared cloud storage during a bachelorette party weekend in Miami, Florida. The materials presented here are unedited and speak for themselves. Viewer discretion is advised. That was it. No accusations, no commentary, no editorial spin. Just a statement of fact that put the responsibility for interpretation squarely on the viewer. Because sometimes the most devastating truth is the one that speaks for itself. The videos were organized chronologically, starting with the innocent group shots from the first night and gradually escalating to the main event. Each file was labeled with just a timestamp and duration, no sensational titles or clickbait descriptions. The content was shocking enough on its own without needing any help from creative marketing. But here's where my professional experience really came in handy. I didn't just dump the raw footage and call it a day. No, I optimized everything. Compressed the files for faster streaming, created multiple resolution options for different connection speeds, and even added closed captions for accessibility. Because if you're going to destroy someone's reputation, you might as well do it with production values. The technical specifications were flawless. SSL encryption for security, CDN distribution for global access, and robust analytics tracking, so I could watch in real time as Christina's dirty laundry got aired to the entire internet. I even set up automated social media sharing buttons, because why should I do all the work of spreading the news when her friends and family could help? The beauty of launching on our supposed wedding day wasn't lost on me. While our guests would have been arriving at the venue, expecting to witness the beautiful union of Marcus and Christina, they instead received a text message with a link to the website and a simple note. This is why there's no wedding today. Short, sweet, and guaranteed to get clicks. I watched the analytics dashboard like a day trader monitoring stock prices. The first visitor hit the site at 10:47 a.m., probably Christina herself, frantically typing her own name into Google after someone forwarded her the link. The visitor count climbed steadily as word spread through our social circles like a digital wildfire. 10 visitors, then 50, then hundreds as people shared the link with friends and family. The geographic distribution was fascinating. Seattle, where we lived. Miami, where her sins were committed. Los Angeles, where her parents had retired. College towns across the country as her sorority sisters got wind of the scandal. The website was going viral in all the worst ways for Christina and all the best ways for truth and justice. By noon, I had confirmation that the message had reached its intended targets. My phone, the new burner I'd picked up just for this occasion, started buzzing with calls from blocked numbers. Christina, probably, trying desperately to reach me from whatever borrowed phone she could get her hands on. Her parents, most likely, calling to demand explanations that would never come. Friends and family members who suddenly found themselves with front-row seats to the destruction of everything they thought they knew about sweet, innocent Christina Ward. The most satisfying part was watching the download statistics. People weren't just viewing the content, they were saving it, sharing it, ensuring that even if I took the site down tomorrow, Christina's Miami memories would live forever in screenshot and screen recording form. The internet never forgets, and I'd just given it something very memorable to hold on to. Around 2 p.m., I got a notification that someone had tried to report the website for hosting revenge porn. Cute attempt, but legally meaningless since all the content had been voluntarily created and automatically shared to a joint account. Christina had essentially published this material herself. I was just providing better distribution and a more user-friendly interface. The comments section I'd included was already filling up with reactions from people who recognized the participants. Former colleagues expressing their shock, family friends asking if this was really the same Christina they'd known since childhood, and college acquaintances sharing their own stories about Becca's previous party planning adventures. The internet had become both judge and jury, and the verdict was unanimous: guilty as charged. As the sun set on what should have been our wedding night, I closed my laptop and allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. Christina Ward had wanted to have her cake and eat it too, living a double life where she could be the perfect fiancé to my face and a completely different person behind my back. Well, now everyone could see exactly what kind of cake she'd been eating in Miami, and the internet was going to make sure she choked on every bite. You know what they say about throwing a stone into a pond? The ripples keep spreading long after the stone has sunk to the bottom. Well, ChristinaWardTruth.com was more like dropping a nuclear bomb into a kiddie pool, and the shockwaves were absolutely magnificent to watch unfold from my front row seat in digital purgatory. The first domino fell on Monday morning, exactly 72 hours after I hit publish. Christina's boss at Morrison Marketing called her into his office for what I can only imagine was the most uncomfortable conversation of her professional life. See, Christina worked for one of those boutique agencies that specialized in family-friendly brands. Think wholesome breakfast cereals, children's toys, and organic baby food companies. Their entire business model was built on trust, reputation, and the kind of squeaky clean image that doesn't mesh well with employees starring in amateur porn productions. According to my sources, and yes, I had sources, because Seattle's marketing community is smaller than you'd think and gossip travels faster than a Tesla in ludicrous mode, the conversation went something like this. Christina, we've become aware of some materials circulating online that feature you prominently. While we don't typically concern ourselves with our employees' private lives, several of our clients have expressed concern about the association with their brands. Translation: you're fired. And we're going to pretend this is about protecting our clients instead of admitting we're embarrassed to have hired someone who thinks gangbangs make for good bachelorette party entertainment. She was escorted out of the building that same afternoon, her corporate access revoked, her company laptop confiscated, and her dreams of becoming the next big thing in marketing flushed down the toilet along with her reputation. 3 years of climbing the corporate ladder, building client relationships, and positioning herself as a rising star in the industry, all undone by one weekend of poor decision-making and Becca's documentary filmmaking skills. But Christina's professional suicide was just the opening act. The real show started when her parents got wind of what their precious daughter had been up to in Miami. Robert and Helen Ward, pillars of their suburban community and devout members of St. Mary's Episcopal Church, suddenly found themselves fielding phone calls from concerned friends who'd stumbled across their daughter's internet debut. Picture this. You're 68 years old, you've spent your entire life building a respectable reputation in your community, and you're known as the couple who raised that lovely, successful daughter who was marrying that nice young man with the software company. Then suddenly you're getting phone calls from your bridge club asking if you've seen what Christina's been up to online, and your pastor is stopping by for an unscheduled visit to discuss family matters. The conversation between Christina and her parents happened over speakerphone, which I know because little Olivia was there and apparently has trouble keeping her mouth shut when she's been drinking. According to her tearful account to anyone who would listen, their father's exact words were, "We didn't raise you to behave like a common whore, and we won't pretend we did just to spare your feelings." Helen, ever the supportive mother, chimed in with, "How could you do this to our family? How are we supposed to show our faces at church knowing that everyone has seen you doing those things?" And just like that, Christina Ward became an orphan at 27. Her parents didn't just disown her, they actively scrubbed her existence from their lives like she was a stain they were trying to bleach out of the family fabric. Photos came down from the mantle, her childhood bedroom got converted into a craft room, and Christmas card lists were suddenly one name shorter. The social ostracism was swift and merciless. The same community that had celebrated her engagement and planned to attend our wedding suddenly treated her like she was carrying the plague. Former friends crossed the street to avoid awkward conversations. Neighbors who used to chat over the fence suddenly found pressing reasons to go inside whenever she appeared. The local coffee shop where she'd been a regular for years started serving her with the kind of cold efficiency usually reserved for difficult customers who never tip. But the real entertainment value came from watching the domino effect spread to her co-conspirators. Becca Lewis, the mastermind behind the whole operation, found herself dealing with some serious relationship turbulence when her fiancé Michael discovered exactly what kind of maid of honor duties she'd been performing in Miami. Turns out Michael was one of those old-fashioned guys who thought fidelity mattered in a relationship. Imagine that. Their breakup was spectacular enough to warrant its own social media subplot. Michael didn't just dump Becca. He did it publicly, posting a lengthy Facebook status that began with, "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them," and ended with, "Some mistakes can't be forgiven, and some trust can't be rebuilt." He even tagged her in it, just to make sure everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Two of the other bridesmaids, Sarah and Jennifer, both married with children, suddenly found themselves explaining to their husbands why they'd thought participating in a group sex situation was appropriate entertainment for a girls' weekend. Sarah's marriage imploded within a week, her husband filing for divorce and demanding full custody of their twins. Jennifer managed to convince her husband that she'd been too drunk to know what she was doing, but their relationship never recovered from the trust issues that followed. The most satisfying casualty was probably Amanda, the elementary school teacher who'd been so enthusiastic about the evening's activities. Turns out school districts take a dim view of educators who star in pornographic materials, even if it's technically their personal time. Parents complained, the school board got involved, and Amanda's teaching license got revoked faster than you can say moral turpitude clause. Even Olivia, sweet little Olivia who was supposed to be the innocent baby sister, found herself dealing with consequences. Her job at the nonprofit was technically safe. They couldn't fire her for legal activities conducted on her own time, but the whispers and awkward interactions made her work environment so toxic that she ended up quitting and moving across the country to start over somewhere her last name didn't come with a built-in Google search nightmare. The beautiful irony of the whole situation was that they'd all thought their Miami weekend was consequence-free fun. Just girls being girls, letting loose before Christina settled down into married life. They'd convinced themselves that what happened in Miami would stay in Miami, like some twisted variation of the Vegas rule. Instead, their private party became a very public lesson in the fact that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come with analytics dashboards and global distribution networks. They'd wanted to have their fun and forget about it. I made sure the internet would never let them forget about anything ever again. And through it all, I remained perfectly, beautifully silent. My brother Daniel has always been the emotional one in the family. You know the type, wears his heart on his sleeve, cries at Pixar movies, and thinks every problem can be solved with a heartfelt conversation and maybe some group therapy. So when he finally tracked me down at my temporary hideout 3 weeks after the website launch, he was expecting to find his big brother curled up in a corner somewhere, drowning his sorrows in whiskey and tissues like some kind of country music cliche. Instead, he found me in my hotel room, sitting at a makeshift desk made from the room's tiny table, surrounded by printed documents, legal pads covered in handwriting, and 3 separate laptops running different monitoring programs. I looked up when he knocked, buzzed him in, and went right back to work like he was just another interruption in my busy schedule of orchestrating Christina's complete social annihilation. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," he said, staring at my setup like he'd walked into some kind of FBI operation. "What the hell is all this?" "Research," I replied, not bothering to look up from the spreadsheet I was updating with the latest casualty reports from Christina's rapidly shrinking social circle. Due diligence, quality control. Pick your favorite business buzzword. They all apply. Daniel sat down on the bed and watched me work for a few minutes, probably trying to process the fact that his emotionally devastated brother had apparently transformed into some kind of revenge-plotting automaton. He kept waiting for me to break down, to show some sign that I was processing this like a normal human being who'd just had his entire life imploded by the woman he loved. "Dude," he finally said, "I expected you to be a mess. I thought I'd find you drunk and crying and listening to sad music. This is fucking terrifying." I looked up from my laptop and smiled at him. Not a bitter smile or a sarcastic one, but the kind of genuine, relaxed smile I used to give clients when I was about to deliver exactly what they'd asked for, on time and under budget. Why would I be a mess? I'm handling this exactly like any other business problem. Identify the issue, research the variables, develop a comprehensive solution, and execute with precision. That's when I showed him the files. 3 accordion folders, each one meticulously organized and labeled, containing everything I'd compiled about Christina's Miami adventure and its aftermath. The first folder was labeled Documentation. Every video, every photo, every text message from that weekend, all printed out and organized chronologically with timestamps and participant identification. The second folder was Background Research, and this is where Daniel's eyes really started to widen. See, while everyone assumed I was off somewhere licking my wounds, I'd actually been quite busy. I'd hired a private investigator, a real one, not some sketchy guy from a strip mall, but a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Professional, thorough, and completely discreet. Within 2 weeks, I had complete background checks on all 4 of the male performers from that night. Names, addresses, employment history, criminal records, and most importantly, medical records. Turns out one of them, a charming gentleman who went by the stage name Thunder, had been carrying a particularly nasty strain of chlamydia that he'd apparently been sharing with clients for the better part of 6 months. "You had her tested?" Daniel asked, flipping through the medical reports. "I had all of them tested," I corrected. Anonymous tip to the health department about potential STD exposure at a private party. They were required to contact everyone who might have been at risk and recommend testing. Very responsible public health policy, don't you think? The third folder was labeled Financial Impact Assessment, because when you're dealing with a business problem, you need to understand the full cost structure. I'd calculated exactly how much money I'd save by canceling the wedding. Venue deposits, catering costs, honeymoon reservations, and about $40,000 worth of other expenses that would have gone towards celebrating a marriage that was already dead before it started. But more interesting was the analysis I'd done of Christina's financial situation post-revelation. Lost income from her terminated employment, legal fees from her attempts to get the website taken down, therapy costs that her insurance didn't cover, and the security deposit she'd lost when she had to break her lease and move back in with friends because her parents had disowned her. "You've been tracking her expenses?" Daniel was looking at me like I'd grown a second head. "Market research," I explained. "If you're going to destroy someone's life, you should understand the full scope of the impact. It's about being thorough." What really freaked him out was the timeline I'd created. A detailed project plan, complete with milestones and deliverables, showing exactly how I'd orchestrated every aspect of Christina's downfall. The website launch had been Phase 1. Phase 2 was the strategic leak to her employer and key social contacts. Phase 3 involved the health department investigation. Phase 4 was ongoing monitoring and documentation of the cascading effects. "This is insane," Daniel said, but there was something like admiration in his voice. "I mean, it's completely psychotic, but it's also impressively organized." "Thank you," I said, genuinely pleased by the compliment. I've always believed that if you're going to do something, you should do it right. Half-assed revenge is just as pathetic as half-assed anything else. I explained to him how I'd approached the whole situation like a product launch. Market research to understand the target audience, content creation and optimization for maximum impact, distribution strategy across multiple channels, and performance analytics to measure success metrics. I even had conversion tracking set up to monitor how many people who visited the website took additional actions like sharing the content or leaving comments. "The beautiful thing about treating it like a business project," I told him, "is that it removes all the messy emotional variables. I'm not doing this because I'm angry or hurt or want revenge. I'm doing it because it's the logical response to the problem Christina created when she decided to film herself fucking 4 strangers and then lie to my face about it for 3 weeks." Daniel was quiet for a long time, just staring at the organized chaos of my temporary war room. Finally, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Don't you feel anything? Aren't you sad or angry or anything?" I considered the question seriously because Daniel deserved an honest answer. "I felt plenty," I said. "For about 48 hours after I found those videos, I felt everything. Rage, heartbreak, betrayal, confusion, the whole emotional buffet. But then I realized that feelings weren't going to solve the problem. Feelings weren't going to make sure she faced appropriate consequences for her choices. Feelings weren't going to prevent her from doing this to some other poor bastard in the future. So you just turn them off." I redirected them. I corrected, channeled them into something productive. Christina thought she could have her fun and then go back to playing the innocent fiancé. She thought actions didn't have consequences as long as nobody found out. I'm simply correcting that misconception using the most efficient methods available. Daniel left that day looking like he'd witnessed something that fundamentally changed his understanding of human nature. And maybe he had, because what he'd seen wasn't his emotional, heartbroken brother grieving the loss of his relationship. What he'd seen was a businessman executing a flawless project plan with the same precision and attention to detail that had made my software company successful. And the project was running exactly on schedule. A year later, Daniel did something that pissed me off more than anything Christina had ever done. And that's saying something considering she'd literally filmed herself getting gangbanged by strangers 3 weeks before our wedding. My brother, in his infinite wisdom and complete disregard for my explicit instructions, decided that Christina deserved to know what had really gone through my head during those final weeks. Because apparently, Daniel had appointed himself the ambassador of emotional closure, and he thought everyone needed to process their feelings like we were all living in some kind of therapeutic reality show. He told me about it over beers at our usual spot, this dive bar near his apartment where the bartender minds his own business and the jukebox still plays actual CDs. Daniel had that guilty look on his face that I remembered from when we were kids, and he'd broken Mom's favorite vase or forgotten to feed our goldfish for a week straight. The look that said he'd done something he knew I wouldn't approve of, but he'd convinced himself it was for my own good. I met with Christina, he said, not even waiting for me to sit down with my beer. Just dropped it on me like a bomb while I was still shrugging out of my jacket. I stopped mid-motion and stared at him. You did what? She's been calling me for months, Marcus. Months. Leaving voicemails, sending texts, begging me to just talk to her for 5 minutes. She wanted to understand what happened, why you just disappeared like that without giving her a chance to explain. There was nothing to explain, I said, finally sitting down and taking a long pull from my beer. The videos explained everything pretty clearly. High definition, multiple camera angles, excellent audio quality. Really, Becca should have gone into documentary filmmaking professionally. But Daniel wasn't going to be deterred by my sarcasm. He had that earnest, concerned brother expression that meant he was about to try to save my soul whether I wanted it saved or not. She's a mess, Marcus. Like, completely broken. You should see her. She's lost probably 20 pounds. She looks like she hasn't slept in months, and she's basically become a hermit because she can't go anywhere without people recognizing her from your website. Good, I said, meaning it. Actions have consequences. She chose to document her extracurricular activities, and I chose to make sure those documents got the audience they deserved. Natural cause and effect. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Daniel said, leaning forward with that intensity he got when he was trying to make a point. You talk about her like she's a business problem you solved, not someone you loved for 3 years. It's not normal, Marcus. It's not healthy. So I told him what I'd told him a dozen times before, that I was fine, that I'd processed everything in my own way, and that Christina Ward could rot in whatever hole she'd crawled into for all I cared. But Daniel had already made up his mind that I needed intervention, and apparently he thought the best way to provide that intervention was to give my ex-fiancée a detailed psychological profile of my mental state during the worst period of my life. I told her about that night, he said, and my blood went cold. The night you found the videos. How you called me at 2 in the morning, completely silent for like 5 minutes before you could even speak. How you described watching those videos like you were giving a police report, no emotion at all, just facts. Christina had sexual intercourse with 4 unidentified males while her friends filmed and encouraged the activity. Like you were reading from a textbook. I wanted to punch him. Actually physically assault my own brother for violating the one confidence I trusted him with during the worst moment of my life. Instead, I finished my beer and ordered another one, because alcohol seemed like a better coping mechanism than fratricide. I told her how you didn't sleep for 3 days, Daniel continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that I was considering whether killing him would be worth the prison sentence. How you sat in your office just staring at spreadsheets, running calculations on how much money you'd lose if you canceled the wedding versus how much you'd lose if you went through with it. How you told me that loving someone who didn't exist was worse than loving someone who didn't love you back. That one hit home because it was true. During those 72 hours between discovery and disappearance, I'd had plenty of time to analyze exactly what had happened to my life. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd planned to marry, the woman I'd built my entire future around, she didn't exist. She was a fictional character that Christina had played for 3 years, a performance so convincing that I'd bought it completely. I told her about the therapy, Daniel said, and now I really did want to kill him. How you didn't go to process grief or anger or any normal human emotion. You went to make sure your exit was emotionally clean, as you put it. How you spent 6 sessions with Dr. Peterson learning techniques for emotional detachment, so you could end the relationship without getting caught up in feelings that might make you change your mind. Dr. Peterson, That smug bastard with his leather-bound notebooks and his carefully neutral expressions, who charged $200 an hour to teach me how to turn off my humanity like it was a software feature I could disable. He'd been fascinated by my approach, treating our sessions like a case study in applied psychology rather than actual therapy. The thing that really got to her, Daniel continued, apparently determined to violate every confidence I'd ever shared with him, was when I explained that you'd decided the opposite of love wasn't hate. That hate would have meant she still mattered to you, still had the power to affect your emotions. You chose indifference because it was the most complete form of erasure you could achieve. Christina had cried when Daniel told her that part. Sobbed, actually, according to his detailed account of their meeting, because she'd finally understood that I hadn't given her the dignity of anger or the respect of a confrontation or even the basic human courtesy of an explanation. I'd simply decided she no longer existed and acted accordingly. She wanted to fight for the relationship, Daniel said. That's what she told me. She said if you'd screamed at her, if you'd thrown things or demanded explanations or given her a chance to grovel and beg forgiveness, she would have done whatever it took to make things right. But you didn't give her anything to fight against. You just erased her. And that, right there, was the point Daniel had missed entirely. Christina didn't deserve a fight. She didn't deserve the chance to explain or apologize or make amends. She deserved exactly what she'd gotten. Nothing. The complete absence of my attention, my emotion, my presence in her life. She asked me if you'd ever loved her at all, Daniel said quietly. If the whole 3 years had been fake, if you'd been planning to leave her anyway. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That you loved who you thought she was. That you would have died for the woman you thought you were marrying. But that woman never existed, and once you figured that out, there was nothing left to love. Daniel finished his beer and looked at me like he was waiting for some kind of emotional breakthrough, some moment of catharsis where I'd break down and admit that I still cared about Christina and needed closure and healing and all that therapeutic bullshit. Instead, I ordered another round and changed the subject to baseball scores. Because the truth was, Daniel had told Christina exactly what she needed to hear, that the punishment wasn't anger or revenge or even hatred. The punishment was nothing at all. 2 years later, I was living proof that the universe has a sixth sense of humor and impeccable timing when it comes to orchestrating the most awkward possible moments in human existence. There I was, standing in the organic produce section of a Whole Foods in downtown Seattle, debating whether the $30 a pound heirloom tomatoes were worth it for the salad Lauren had requested, when fate decided to play its cruelest joke yet. I heard my name whispered behind me like a prayer or a curse, and I knew immediately who it was without turning around. You know how they say you never forget your first love? Well, you also never forget the voice of the woman who taught you that love is just an elaborate con game played by people who haven't figured out how to be honest about what they really want. Marcus. I turned around slowly, like I was moving through water, and there she was. Christina Ward, or whatever name she was going by these days. The woman who had once been the center of my universe, now looking like a completely different person standing next to the overpriced organic kale. 2 years had not been kind to her, and I found myself conducting an involuntary before and after comparison like she was a cautionary tale about the long-term effects of public humiliation. The Christina I remembered had been radiant, confident, always perfectly put together like she was constantly ready for an impromptu photo shoot. This Christina looked like she'd been living under a bridge for the past 24 months. She'd lost weight, too much weight, the kind that makes a person look fragile instead of fit. Her hair, which had once been her pride and joy, was pulled back in a simple ponytail that screamed, "I've given up on trying to look good." And her clothes, Jesus Christ, her clothes looked like she'd picked them up from a clearance rack at Target without bothering to check if they actually fit. But it was her eyes that really got me. Those green eyes that had once sparkled with intelligence and humor now looked hollow, haunted, like she'd seen things that had fundamentally changed her understanding of how the world worked. Which, to be fair, she probably had. Having your entire life implode in high definition and then get shared with the internet tends to leave a mark. "Christina," I said, my voice perfectly neutral, like I was acknowledging a casual acquaintance I'd run into at a coffee shop. No warmth, no anger, no recognition of our shared history, Just polite acknowledgement that she'd said my name and basic social courtesy demanded a response. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Actually flinched, like the sound of her own name coming from my mouth was physically painful. Which was probably fair, since I'd made that name pretty goddamn toxic over the past 2 years. "How are you?" she asked, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. The need to have this conversation, to somehow bridge the gap between who we used to be and who we were now, standing in a grocery store treating each other like strangers. "I'm well," I replied, because I was. Better than well, actually. I was thriving in ways I never could have imagined when I was wasting my time trying to build a life with someone who thought fidelity was optional as long as you didn't get caught. She nodded like that was exactly the answer she'd expected and dreaded. "I heard you got married," she said, and I could see her trying to force enthusiasm into her voice. "Congratulations. That's wonderful." "Thank you," I said, adjusting my wedding ring slightly, not consciously, but she noticed anyway. Her eyes followed the movement like it was a knife being twisted in a wound. "Lauren is a surgeon. We met through mutual friends about 18 months ago." The timeline wasn't lost on her. 18 months ago meant I'd found someone new, fallen in love, gotten engaged, and married, all while she was still dealing with the fallout from her Miami adventure. While she was probably still trying to figure out how to rebuild her life from the smoking crater I'd left behind. I'd moved on completely and built something better with someone who understood basic concepts like honesty and commitment. "That's great," she said, and I give her credit for trying to sound like she meant it. "Really great. I'm happy for you." "We're expecting our first child in the spring," I added, because sometimes truth is the most effective weapon available. "Lauren's about 5 months along. We're very excited." That one hit like a physical blow. I watched her face crumble for just a second before she managed to pull herself together and force another smile. Because we'd talked about kids, back when we were playing house and pretending to plan a future together. We'd even picked out names, had debates about public versus private school, discussed whether we wanted to raise them in the city or move to the suburbs. Now I was having that future with someone else, someone who deserved it, while Christina got to stand in a grocery store and pretend she was happy about it. "I'm glad you found someone," she said, and her voice cracked just slightly on the word someone. "You deserve to be happy." "I am," I said simply, because it was true. I was happy in ways I'd never been with her, even during what I'd thought were our best moments. Lauren and I had built something real, something honest, something that didn't require me to constantly worry about what she was doing when I wasn't around. Christina took a deep breath, like she was preparing for something difficult. "Marcus, I know this probably isn't the time or place, but I need to say something. I need you to know how sorry I am. About everything. About what I did. About how I hurt you about." "Christina," I interrupted, my voice still perfectly calm and neutral. "It's been 2 years. Apologies are for the moment they matter. Right now, they're just words that make you feel better about yourself." She stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "But don't you want to know why? Don't you want me to explain what happened that weekend? What I was thinking? Why I made those choices?" I considered the question seriously, not because I was actually curious about her motivations, but because she seemed to genuinely believe that I might be. "No," I said finally. "I really don't. What you did explained everything I needed to know about who you are. The rest is just details. I never cheated on you before," she said desperately, like that somehow made it better. "Miami was the first time, the only time. I want you to know that." And that, right there, was what made me almost feel sorry for her. Almost. "That actually makes it worse," I told her. "If you'd been cheating all along, at least I could tell myself our entire relationship was a lie and move on. But knowing you threw away 3 years of building something real for one weekend of meaningless fun with strangers? That's not tragic, Christina. That's just stupid." She started crying then, right there in the produce section, tears streaming down her face while other shoppers pretended not to notice the drama unfolding next to the organic spinach. "I fucked up," she whispered. "I fucked up so badly, and I've spent every day for 2 years wishing I could take it back." "I know," I said, and for the first time in the conversation, I felt something almost like sympathy. But wishing doesn't change anything. Actions have consequences, and those consequences don't disappear just because you regret the actions. I grabbed a bag of the expensive tomatoes and put them in my cart, ready to end this encounter and get back to my actual life. But she wasn't done yet. "Do you hate me?" she asked, and I could tell this was the question she'd been building up to, the one that had been eating at her for 2 years. I looked at her one last time, really looked at her, taking in the damage that her choices had caused not just to me, but to herself. "No, Christina," I said. "I don't hate you. Hate would mean you still matter to me. You don't." And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing there among the overpriced vegetables with tears on her face, and the final confirmation that I'd erased her from my life as completely as if she'd never existed at all. Her real name, spoken one last time, closing the file forever. Today, as I sit in my home office overlooking Elliott Bay with a cup of coffee that costs more than Christina probably spends on groceries in a week, I can honestly say that life has a way of rewarding people who understand the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge is emotional, messy, and ultimately unsatisfying because it keeps you connected to the person who wronged you. Justice, on the other hand, is clean, permanent, and allows you to move on with your life while ensuring that actions have appropriate consequences. Seattle turned out to be the perfect place for a fresh start. Clean air, progressive values, and a tech industry that appreciates people who can solve complex problems without getting bogged down in emotional drama. My software company not only survived the transition from my old life, but actually thrived once I stopped dividing my attention between building a business and managing a relationship with someone who thought commitment was more of a suggestion than a binding agreement. The irony isn't lost on me that Christina's betrayal was probably the best thing that ever happened to my career. Without the distraction of trying to maintain a relationship with someone who was fundamentally dishonest, I was able to focus entirely on growing the company. We landed 3 major clients in the first year after I moved to Seattle, expanded our development team by 60%, and opened satellite offices in Portland and Vancouver. Success, it turns out, is much easier to achieve when you're not constantly wondering what your significant other is doing behind your back. But the real victory isn't professional, it's personal. Lauren Walsh walked into my life about 18 months after the Christina debacle, and she's everything my ex-fiancé pretended to be but never actually was. She's a cardiac surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital, which means she's brilliant, dedicated, and actually saves lives for a living instead of just talking about wanting to make a difference while working in marketing for companies that sell overpriced breakfast cereal to suburban moms. What I love most about Lauren is her complete inability to bullshit. When you spend your days literally holding children's hearts in your hands, you develop a pretty low tolerance for dishonesty and game playing. She told me on our 3rd date that she didn't have time for men who weren't serious about building something real, and she meant it. No mixed signals, no manipulation, no testing me to see if I'd chase her when she pulled away. Just straight talk from someone who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. Our son is due in March, a little boy we're planning to name James, after Lauren's grandfather who was apparently some kind of legendary heart surgeon back in the day. I've been to every ultrasound appointment, every prenatal checkup, every preparation class they offer at the hospital. Not because I feel obligated to, but because I'm genuinely excited about becoming a father with someone I trust completely. That's the difference between love and whatever the hell I had with Christina. With Lauren, I never wake up wondering if she's telling me the truth about where she was last night or who she was with. I never have to check her phone or worry about what she's doing when I'm out of town on business. The anxiety that I didn't even realize I was carrying for 3 years with Christina just disappeared. Turns out, when you're with someone who's actually trustworthy, you don't spend your time looking for signs of betrayal. People ask me sometimes if I hate Christina, usually in that concerned tone that suggests they think I'm repressing some deep psychological trauma that's going to surface at an inconvenient moment and ruin my new life. The answer is always the same. Hate requires caring, and I genuinely don't care what happens to her. She's become completely irrelevant to my existence, like a plot line from a TV show I stopped watching years ago. I know she's still in Seattle, probably because she can't afford to move anywhere else after losing her job and burning through whatever savings she had on legal fees trying to get my website taken down. Daniel mentioned seeing her working at some coffee shop in Capitol Hill, which seems fitting somehow. From marketing executive to barista, a natural progression for someone who thought documenting their infidelity was a good idea. The website itself came down eventually, not because of any legal pressure, but because it had served its purpose. Christina Ward's name was permanently associated with her Miami adventure in search engine results. Social media had preserved countless screenshots and recordings, and enough people had downloaded the original content to ensure it would resurface if she ever tried to rebuild her reputation. Mission accomplished. That's the beautiful thing about the internet age. Accountability is permanent. In the old days, people could move to a new town, change their name, and reinvent themselves after making catastrophic life choices. Now, your mistakes follow you forever, which is exactly as it should be. Actions should have consequences, and those consequences should be proportional to the damage caused. Christina didn't just cheat on me. She documented it, celebrated it, and then lied to my face about it for weeks while I planned our wedding like an idiot. She chose to create permanent evidence of her betrayal, so I simply made sure that evidence got the audience it deserved. Poetic justice, delivered through technology and social media virality. The most satisfying part isn't her downfall. It's my complete indifference to it. I don't check up on her, don't ask Daniel for updates, don't Google her name to see if she's managed to crawl out of the hole she dug for herself. She exists in my mind only as a cautionary tale about the importance of thoroughly vetting potential life partners before making long-term commitments. Lauren knows the whole story, obviously. I told her everything on our 6th date, when things were getting serious enough that she deserved to know why I was so careful about trust and commitment. Her response was perfect. So you found out your ex was a liar and a cheater, and instead of wasting years trying to fix her, you moved on and built a better life. That sounds like healthy decision-making to me. No drama, no jealousy, no insecurity about competing with my past. Just a practical assessment from someone who understands that people's previous choices are usually excellent predictors of their future behavior. Some people might call what I did to Christina cruel or disproportionate. I call it educational. She learned that actions have consequences. Her friends learned that enabling bad behavior makes you complicit in those consequences, and any future partners she might have will be able to make informed decisions about whether they want to risk getting involved with someone who thinks fidelity is optional. The world is a slightly more honest place because of what I did, and I sleep perfectly well at night knowing that. Silence has always been the loudest answer. And in that silence, I didn't just win. I built something infinitely better than what I lost.